Mindfulness Practitioner here at Summit, and I'm going to chat with you guys for a little while about stress management in our daily lives. And my goal with this was just to give you some good ideas for actual practices to handle stress, and also just different perspectives or ways of thinking that might help with moving through stress or anxiety or worry a little bit easier. I think the title of this on the advertising was Mindfulness. I went a little bit more the stress management route, but I think the important thing to understand is that they're both very related. So mindfulness is kind of the first step of good stress management. So mindfulness is awareness. And if we're not aware of what is causing us stress or worry in our lives, then we really can't take the right steps to address it. So having that mindfulness is an important first step. Okay.
Pop the button. Try poking it at the computer.
Oh. Maybe I have to get behind. Lily, any ideas on how I might be able to advance this now? It was, unless the battery. Okay. Was I pushing the wrong direction?
It just wasn't on. Go to the.
How'd you get it to turn on? Okay. Anyway, thank goodness it's working again. So this statistic just kind of demonstrates the importance of good stress management. In 2020, a survey demonstrated an increasing overall perceived stress levels among Americans. And that's according to the American Psychological Association. So a pretty reputable organization coming up with a statistic like this. So it's hard to argue, I think, that stress levels haven't been on the rise for at least the last few years with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I think we're all sensitive to that. So these are just some good questions to think about before we get into the ideas that I came up with for ways to manage anxiety and worry. What are your current feelings towards stress and worry? How do you think about that?
I've been turning a lot of my stress over to God and letting go.
That's a powerful coping mechanism, turning your stress over to a higher power. Is it scary? Is stress scary?
Yeah.
And it's also important, like we said a few minutes ago, with the concept of mindfulness at work, to ask ourselves what the sources of our stress are. And then, of course, how do we currently manage our stress? Do we do that in healthy ways? Or not so healthy ways?
Yeah, or something.
Yeah, so probably some of both is
There's always
most
something
typical.
to comfort.
Yes, definitely. And then also really important to think about what our goals are for stress management. What do we expect to achieve? Is it realistic to anticipate or hope that we'd be able to completely eliminate stress and worry from our lives? Probably not. So important to have realistic goals. So talking briefly about what stress is and where it comes from. Stress is our body's normal reaction to things going on inside of us and around us. And it really is kind of a defense mechanism, a self-protection mechanism at the end of the day. And it's important to acknowledge that stress comes from kind of things that we're conscious of, that we are aware of or mindful of, and also things that we're not actively thinking about, so things that are more in our subconscious. And with the power of mindfulness, sometimes we can bring the things from our subconscious into our active conscious and become more aware of them and deal with them more effectively. It's a natural reaction. It can be helpful in certain circumstances. And it's definitely good practice to take those few minutes of mindfulness, raise your awareness, and ask yourself, is the worry, the stress that I'm feeling, is this a healthy, helpful sort of stress? Or is this more of a harmful, chronic stress that I've felt for a long time and I know I need to do something to reduce? And of course, stress comes from many places. We're all stressed by, we're all stressed by different things because we're different individuals. But there is also a lot of common ground. You know, we all have the potential to worry about if our basic needs are going to be met. You know, a lot of us have stress over financial things. So there is that common ground, but of course, you know, we're not all worrying about the same things. There's a lot of variation there. Important to acknowledge that stress is normal. So when we feel anxious or worried, we shouldn't be shameful of that. We shouldn't try to hide that. And in fact, communication about our worry can be really important and helpful. But unfortunately, oftentimes people are kind of ashamed that they're feeling such anxiety, so they don't really talk to people or reach out for help.
That's not something that they teach you in school either. That's a lifelong learning curveball.
Yes, not something that they teach you in school. We have to learn that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to be human, I think.
Yeah. Well, like I didn't think about going back younger and bullies in school versus not putting up with it at my age. How do you convey that to someone that's much younger than you that some is normal, and how do you protect yourself? So this is a really good thing to have on here.
Yeah, a good conversation to have with younger people. Making sure that they know there's nothing wrong with feeling afraid or worried, and that you hope that they feel comfortable reaching out to get help. And making ourselves available to help other people that are stressed is huge. So interesting to think that stress can and worry can kind of be contagious. We have certain areas in our brain that have specialized cells called mirror neurons, so that we're actually, very perceptive to people's verbal and nonverbal communications, so that we're kind of absorbing the way that others around us are thinking and feeling. You've heard of people that are called empaths. So people that are very empathetic tend to have more mirror neurons to where they're more sensitive to other people's energies and emotions.
My identical twins are highly specialized in
With each other or with everyone?
with each other, but they've been able to incorporate that into their adult life.
Yeah, that's an amazing phenomenon, I think.
And you said mirror, like am I?
Mirror neurons. And so that, I think when we feel worry, it can be helpful just to check in and say, is this fear or concern my own? Or is this coming from someone around me that I need to be more therapeutic to and try not to let myself be overwhelmed with that sense of stress. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because we can't really be super helpful for others who are dealing with stress if we are overcome by what they're dealing with. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So just kind of a brief overview of what actually is going on inside of our body when we are stressed. Not going into too deep of the concepts with actual cellular mechanisms and things like that, but we are preparing for action. Our body is generating some kind of response to what's going on in our mind to make change. And whether we actually end up making that change, that's another story.
That's another stress.
Another stress. How to make the change.
Yeah, and doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually implementing the change can be very difficult in itself.
That first statement, it's funny because Dawn and I were just talking about Atomic Habits, the
Oh,
book.
yeah.
Mm.
That is huge, and I didn't know one person could write an entire book on getting out of crazy.
Yeah. That's a powerful book.
Yeah, it's not bedtime material reading though.
So hormones, of course, different hormones like cortisol are released in our body during a stress response. And that causes us to go into kind of a fight or flight self-protection mode where our sympathetic nervous system is activated to different degrees. And sometimes with a stress reaction, our senses get sharpened. So we can see a little bit more sharply, we can hear a little bit more acutely, and that can be helpful for dealing with acute or short-term immediate stressors that we encounter.
Wow.
We are disconnected from our mode of rest and recovery. And that's an important thing to remember. Stress isn't rational in that respect because it's taking us away from a place where we can heal. So sometimes that's a helpful mechanism for me to be like, okay, I'm worried right now, but that's not going to serve me because I need to be in a calm place where I can do my best and heal and speak my true intentions. Survival rather than peace and joy and experiencing things fully becomes our priority when we get too stressed.
Totally stress.
So yeah. This is just food for thought. This is kind of an intense concept and kind of an intense statement. But I know for myself recently, I've noticed that a lot of my worry comes from fear of suffering. And so I'm trying to be more rational about understanding that the suffering that I encounter may not be extreme. There's different variations of suffering. So,
What kind? All kinds?
of suffering.
Yeah.
I think the important thing to remember here is if we identify that our worry and our stress is in fact coming from a fear of suffering, is to remember that we can probably get through it. We probably have the capacity of our mind and body to get through the suffering. So perhaps it's not something to fear so much if we have the power to overcome it. And perhaps there's a lesson in it.
Generally there is. That's kind of how it's set up.
I agree, generally there is.
Yeah. It goes back to God never gives us more than we can handle, but even so, stress is the opposite of faith. To me, all of this is just like an overload for a brain after everything that I've been through. physically and chemically induced. But the reality of not just that part, but your personal and even caring for somebody else, where that extra worry or stress comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, caring for others can be
Yeah.
a very stressful job. So that's why it's important to have good coping mechanisms to get through it, to navigate the stress, and new, fresh ways of thinking about what's going on in our mind when we feel worried all the time. How bad is stress? I'm sure we've all heard about the plethora of different consequences that long-term stress can have. So, heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, chronic pain, lethargy, psychiatric disorders like depression. The list goes on, and ultimately, it can be deadly. Stress can kill. All the more reason to make it a daily practice for us to be aware of it, be mindful of the stress that we're feeling, and think about ways to reduce that.
I've been part of a program through the VA on mindfulness for the last 3 years, and it's dealing with how to overcome pain.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So we're taking the calm techniques and just emptying your mind basically, so the pain can just dissipate.
Yeah, mindfulness can actually be a pretty powerful tool for pain management, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. So how can we stop stress? Lifestyle changes can help us reduce our stress level. But as we talked about, we don't want to eliminate all stress, and it's not realistic to think that we can. And then again, going back to that mindfulness thing, is this stress trying to tell me something that I need to change? An important part of stress management is preparedness. So what kind of routine are you building? What kind of arsenal of tools do you have available to manage stress as it comes up over and over again in our lives? Because it does and it will. And then for the next few slides, I kind of came up with a level system in terms of what mechanisms or concepts are the most accessible and maybe the easiest to implement right away. And then the level 3 concepts can be really powerful, but if we haven't thought about them a lot, they might feel a little strange. And the level system won't be true for everyone because a lot of us have already thought about, the level 3 things. So
Level 3, to me, sometimes, I don't know how to say this, is generally, as a rule, it's other people giving you advice or pointing things out that you may not have been aware of, that you're stressed. If you're around people that you can trust, and they recognize something that you don't. That, I think, the powerful concepts to implement into daily life. If someone is offering you a change of how to approach something, then they may be seeing your stress and you're not.
So acceptance of feedback can be a difficult thing.
I don't know what your next
I agree.
thing is, but that has been a recent encounter for me personally. So it's
Good for you, though, for listening to people and considering it and honoring that it may actually have some value. There are many ways to reduce stress, and I feel like we should use as many as we can to kind of strengthen our armor against stress. So what I do in my life is I try to have a daily routine that I stick to manage stress. And when that gets thrown off, I just try to come back to the routine the next day. And I try to pack as many things into a day as I can. And we'll talk about some of those.
Oh, that's great.
Nature is a really powerful
De-stressor.
de-stressor. And to sit in nature and be mindful in nature is kind of one of probably the most powerful ways to manage worry. To just let your senses become aware and soak in all the different things going on around you in a setting like this. And just kind of let all those sensations wash the fear away. And that's another important piece of mindfulness. When you are tuning in, when you're becoming aware of things that you're intentionally searching for, things that you're not looking for float into your mind, like worry. If you're sitting out in nature like this and worry creeps in, just give it permission to exit for the time being. And don't say, oh, I'm so silly, I can't do this correctly, or oh, I shouldn't be thinking about this right now. Don't be hard on yourself. Just let it go for now. Did you have a question?
I was just a comment. I'm reading that book that was written in the 60s, and the man was talking about the importance of taking time away, just going back to nature and having like a miniature retreat once a month or so. Just take a day or two, just go get away.
Yeah, getting
That's
away.
important.
Getting away from the hustle and the bustle and the noise and the fast pace can be powerful medicine. Simple, but powerful. So these are all generally pretty accessible level 1 concepts of treating your body with respect and love. Treating your body like the temple it is. It's the only one you get, and it goes with you for your whole life. So it's important to think about trying to eat nutritiously, prioritizing sleep.
That's a hard one for me.
Yeah, that can be challenging. All of these can be challenging, but they're so kind of simple in their core.
And making them daily habits.
Yeah, making them daily habits. And if we slip out of the daily habit, just saying, okay, I'm human, I'm vulnerable, making mistakes is part of that, or veering off track, not necessarily making mistakes, but veering off track is part of being vulnerable, and now we'll get back on track.
It's like that, donut.
Yes. After a good donut, it's time to find your way back to the healthy track.
But we were in the cooking class together, my things, so, yeah, kind of get home to it.
Yeah. Of course, moving your body as much as you can and doing that as often as you can outdoors. There's some research to show that outdoor exercise is superior to indoor exercise for mental health.
Except if you're working out with Will, you can't work outside. He doesn't do the workout outside, it's always inside.
Oh, really? Just refuses to go outside?
Well, it's the gym's inside.
Oh, is Will...
Will can't invent our exercise physiology.
Okay. Yeah, so if you're doing like physical therapy, that's a little bit different, of course, but if you can, in addition to that, in addition to what you're doing in the gym with a physical therapist or a trainer or someone like that, try to get outside and move. Drinking plenty of water, avoiding substances that will only create more trouble in the long run or create rebound worry. A lot of things like alcohol and marijuana kind of decrease short-term stress levels and take away the anxiety for a few hours. But then when it comes back, over time especially, it gets more intense. And then meditation. don't know how many people are familiar with meditation. But really, at its core, meditation is mindfulness. It's raising your awareness.
I find that when I do meditation that I can physically reduce my anxiety to the point where I know I can lower my blood pressure.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. You can actually lower your blood pressure with effective meditation, like you said, lower your heart rate, measure the actual response in our body that good meditation can have. And I say good meditation because it takes practice.
Lots of practice.
Yes.
Doesn't come easy.
The first few times it's like you close your eyes for 5 seconds and you say, oh, I can't do this. I have too many racing thoughts. So you have to just force yourself or will yourself to come back to it.
You know,
And let yourself not be great at
I
first.
found that mindfulness and meditation tied together, and anxiety. Like I've had major heart problems this past year, and going into any procedure, I go into that process the day of, hours up to going into the room.
Mm-hmm.
That I just calm myself down before it happens.
Totally, yeah. Using meditation and mindfulness before you know you're going to be in a situation that causes you more stress and anxiety. Yeah, preparing. That's huge. That's a great way to go. Well done. So as we kind of touched on earlier, the power of our daily routines can be very effective over reducing ongoing stress levels. And then structuring your daily routine from as much of a holistic lens as you can. So thinking about your mind, your body, and your spirit, and doing things that are good for all of those things throughout the day is going to be most effective. Slowing things down as much as you can so that you have the opportunity to feel and think about what you're doing, and it's not just autopilot. And so then we're going to go through some things on the following slides that are good things to try to incorporate into your daily routine as much as you can, if they make sense for you.
They should not feel overwhelmed.
No, they should not. And that's again with the level system. So if like a level 3 thing feels like, ooh, I don't get this, this just seems like too much right now, then set it aside for later. But maybe down the line, it could have some value for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and allow, just as our body is a work in progress, growing and changing, and our mind is constantly growing and changing, our routine can be just as fluid as that, just as flexible. It's not meant to be concrete for the rest of our life.
When you do that, then you get anxiety for run outside the lines.
Yeah, yeah. We can be pretty hard on ourselves sometimes, huh?
Yeah.
Just a couple little tidbits to think about.
Minimalism and simplicity.
Now, the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Have you decluttering?
Yes.
Yeah, literally. I mean, we're in a point where the floors and walls and everything that we walk through have to be handicap accessible. No avalanches when you walk by. We have cats that trip us, but that's different. You can move the toys, but you can't move cats. Exactly. That's that bottom line is something we've been working on.
I think kind of a powerful image or way to visualize the potential of minimalism is thinking about a backpack, like an imaginary backpack that you have on. And the more things that you're stuffing into the backpack, the heavier it gets, and the more we have to think about and worry about. So sometimes just trying to identify what it is that's really important to us in life and go back to those things and let all the other things fall away as much as you can. That's kind of minimalism in a nutshell. And also being grateful for
Gratitude.
for those simple things.
Yeah.
Like if all we had was our basic needs met, if all we had was a shelter and food and water and other people to talk to, is that enough to be happy?
But I think COVID all put all of us in that box, being stuck home.
Yeah. COVID definitely
Yeah.
did
I
put us to the test.
especially it changes your perspective on life completely. There wasn't one person in the world that hasn't been affected by that. That's a huge stressor in trying to figure out what to do within and then coming out of it. I don't know about anybody else, but I have met people that are so different than when I knew them 2 years ago. Because we've experienced a stressor that was greater than ourselves that we didn't have control over.
We've experienced a lot of suffering together. But would we agree that maybe there's been some value in it?
I've
Some
seen
lesson
more positive.
for us? You've seen more positive?
Yes, very much so.
That's powerful to think about. So these are just some quotes on anxiety and worry. There are many terrible things in my life. Most of them never happened. A lot of times we just sit and stew, we catastrophize about horrible things that are going to happen that never happen. So if only we could kick that darn catastrophization tendency to the curb. Change the situation if you can, or change your attitude about the unchangeable. So using that mindfulness, raising your awareness to understand if something that's stressing you out is truly changeable and how you can go about changing it and doing that. But also some things we just have to accept. We have to try to let them be and let them go if we can get to that place. And of course, worry about tomorrow will rob us of the joy we can experience today.
That's true.
So why? It's easy to say, but why in the world? Not easy to do. So silly to worry if it can rob us of the lesson and the joy and the experience of being in the now.
Love your pets. So yeah.
Togetherness. Being together and being with our pets, that's a huge way to
I think through
Manage.
COVID, having the pets made a big difference in our home.
Oh yeah.
oh, I'm sure.
That's the way it was in our home too, when COVID hit, it was like we were home with our pets.
Yeah.
And we even had a picture where we tried to put a mask on our dogs to copy what we were wearing. It was hard to do, but
Fun picture.
yeah,
A fun experience
yeah.
with your dogs. But yeah, being locked. If we have to be locked in our house or stuck in our house, we might as well be there with the people and the animals that we love. And I think togetherness is a powerful concept for stress management because a lot of times we get overwhelmed because we think we're alone. We're like overcome with worry that we're not going to be able to do this on our own. But the reality is most of us have people, most of us have loved ones or access to potential people or loved ones that can help us get through the hard times. So though it may feel like it sometimes, it's important to try to believe that we're not in it alone. And then I'm sure some of you are familiar with the science of how we are innately social organisms that are healthier and our systems work more effectively and efficiently when we have social environments to be a part of. That's just good old fact. Giving as much as we hope to receive can be powerful. Taking any opportunity we can to volunteer or give back helps create that sense of belongingness, of togetherness, of not being alone. And then maybe some of you have heard about the research that pets actually tend to lower anxiety levels of their owners over time.
Yeah.
There's, facts out there to support
Oh, yeah.
the power of our fur babies.
Also,
But
with the pets, they sense, like if you have trauma, they sense it, like they can be a warning system for you.
yeah, totally. The pets sense our trauma, and they sense when our anxiety level around that trauma starts to rise. Yeah, that's amazing. And I said this concept was kind of a level one because our people and our pets should be pretty accessible, but not everyone's going to agree with that, of course. Some people have a harder time getting access to other people for whatever reason. They're shy, or they live out in the boonies, yeah. So there are reasons why this may not be super accessible for everyone. This one's more of a level 3 concept, kind of a little difficult to digest for some of us. But if we can gain power over perceive things, that would be a pretty powerful place to be, I think. Because at the end of the day, the reality that we're experiencing is a consequence of what's going on in here, in our brain. So if we can tweak that and choose to see things in a little bit different of a way with practice, that puts us in a pretty good space for being able to handle hard things.
One of the standbys is you never know how someone really is until you walk around in their shoes.
Totally, yeah.
And to realize that it's significant. It's like my mom. I ended up having some health challenges at a young age, and my mom had come in, and my dishes were rinsed and off to the side. They just hadn't been washed yet. And health-wise, that was a challenge for me to do. Being a neatneck, she found that was something that shouldn't have been let slide. You should just do it whenever. I have 2 young kids, and life happens. It wasn't until she was close to retirement, she had a hip replacement and still working, and she said, I have to apologize for what I said years ago because I've never experienced that until she became disabled enough to where at least the dishes were rinsed and they were getting ready to be washed or put into the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Until she actually experienced that herself.
So what if we choose to give people that are stressing us out the benefit of the doubt? What if we choose to believe they're doing the best they can? That'd be
It helps,
powerful
or
way
else
to-
finding out if that is the best that they can do, or is there something that you see that's tripping them up and not being afraid to say something to them? That is, it's really hard.
difficult.
But unless we communicate, it's like the people that noticed that I was not being able to have a conversation after this last illness, that I couldn't get from my brain to my mouth and have an adult conversation, you're left wanting to fill in the blanks for them or what you think they're going to be saying and have the words and you're like, no, that's not what I mean. But if you see something that you can say to somebody else and you're safe with them, I wouldn't go up to a stranger.
Oh, yeah.
completely and do that.
Familiarity with the person is important for that.
So gaining influence over my own perspective with how or what another person may be doing, I have to look at myself too because I'm doing things that I've never done before. How do I de-stress my stress from recognizing I'm not playing with full deck of cards right now? The challenges that have coming back have been very hard.
And being gentle with ourselves.
Oh my gosh.
Being
sometimes
graceful with ourselves.
That's hard to do sometimes. Yeah.
But we should definitely at least give ourselves the same grace that we give to everyone else.
Sometimes that's harder to do.
It is hard to do. Something to shoot for, though. A couple interesting points on this slide. Duality, the concept of duality, means that something can be both horrible and beneficial at the same time. As hard as that is to see in a lot of situations, many times there's a bright side.
I've seen this in death with my, talking with my siblings, my mom, when she, getting ready to pass, where she accepted the things that this is gonna happen. She was doing it, and then all of a sudden her perspective on how she lived every day changed a little bit to the better. She was more forthcoming, more talkative.
And taking a horrible situation and finding it beneficial.
It's never too late for this to happen. So it can happen early on in life, or it can happen,
Later.
as someone is entering their final stretch. Yeah, seeing things in a different way. I think the quote at the bottom is super interesting if we can wrap our minds around it. And again, it has to do with that perspective thing. We always talk about the light at the end of the tunnel, focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel. But what if it's the darkness that isn't really there? Or what if it's the darkness that's only secondary to the light that is the emphasis, or that we can allow to be the emphasis?
That's another way to gain your influence over your perspective for sure.
Definitely.
I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, that's a powerful quote.
I'm at home with this one.
Do you guys live close to the ocean?
Yeah, we live here in Grace Harbor.
But I mean, like Hoquiam or out that way?
I grew up in Hokum, so I was always around the bay.
Yeah.
But the beach really isn't that far away.
We have so many great opportunities around here for mindfulness. And for living, this is something I picked up a couple days ago, living as much as we can in the sublime. So walking around in a constant state of wonder and just seeing the mystery and everything and the beauty and the bigger than us-ness in it.
And we had an example of that today, where we had our garden patch that we didn't do this year. We had a newborn bird just sitting there on a perch.
You swallow that and bite God in his wings, mom and dad are trying to lift him up.
Yeah, a newborn baby bird, what an amazing opportunity to see the sublime in something. And if we can train our mind, to see that in everything, or as much as possible, that's a pretty soothing idea, I think.
One of our least expensive trips is just to take a drive through Lake Sylvia campground. The air there is different than anywhere else. Lake Sylvia has a certain smell and it's very calming. Just to even take a half an hour to sit in the car or walk to a picnic bench or something, that helps a lot.
Yeah. Take time, slow down. Smell the smells, hear the
Birds.
sounds,
Or indeed,
feel the sensations.
Here are crickets.
Yes, crickets are awesome to listen to. So here's another concept, the concept of flow. Getting in the groove or being in the zone are other ways to think about flow. And as we're in the zone or we're in the groove of our daily routines and going through the day, it's important to try to have fun with it. Try to celebrate a little bit. Again, kind of willing ourselves to have fun or to celebrate until it becomes more natural. The concept of flow involves leaning into life, actively participating, and meeting it as it comes to you. Choosing to believe that whatever comes to you is something that you can get through, learn from, and grow from. Being fully present in one experience at a time, prioritizing rather than multitasking. Because if you're multitasking, you're not fully present in any one experience. But in our world today, where there's so many stimuli and so many things going on, things to do, it's hard not to multitask. We feel like we have to.
When they talk about multitasking, it talks about the effectiveness of being at work for instance. If you're multitasking, your productivity goes down instead of doing one task at a time.
Yeah, there's actually research, right, to support that when people are trying to multitask, their productivity overall goes down. Or when there's too many distractions around them, productivity, again, goes down.
It's like putting a dish into the microwave rather than cooking a full-blown meal. Keeping it simple instead of making it a production.
Not getting too spread out or distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a cool way to think about it is, a river that's flowing around obstacles. If you're thinking about kind of a limited amount of that river, of the water, it's taking on one obstacle at a time. It's not trying to do it all at once. It's waiting till it gets further down and taking the rocks or the trees or whatever the obstacle is one at a time. There's a link down here at the bottom that's a pretty great video about more extensively what the concept of flow is, if you want to check out the link at all. Okay, yeah.
Did you get it?
They may even be able to email you slides later. I don't know if they have your emails, but like a PDF of the slides, or I'll talk with Lily, who's the marketing gal, and see if that's an option. Got it. Good.
That's one thing I learned with the phone, is use the camera first.
Yeah, see the camera out. Nice to have always
We're learning it's not as stressful.
Use it as a tool instead of a toy.
Oh, I'm so proud of you.
So flow is directed by our power or our intention. What is the barrier we need to get through, and what capability do we have inside ourselves to overcome that challenge? And capability isn't just of our body. Doesn't mean we have a strong body necessarily. Doesn't necessarily mean we have a super strong mind. It can be a combination of the two. And as long as we have some ability, we have power. Even if we're not at the same level of ability that we've always been.
Set goals that are accessible and try not to have great expectations on that.
Accessible, realistic goals.
Goes back
Smaller.
to prioritizing rather than
And the book that you mentioned earlier,
atomic habits.
Atomic Habits, isn't that kind of about setting
Oh, yeah.
more realistic goals that
Yeah.
lead up to bigger
Yeah.
things or
And-
lifestyle
and
change?
The plan and being in.
And also getting them to the routine, like you said,
Yeah.
into the flow, as you said earlier.
Choosing to have faith sometimes that's a choice. Just choosing to believe that either myself or my loved one or a greater power is going to allow me to get through this. And a super, super powerful choice if we can make that. If we can allow ourselves to be faithful. Setting and maintaining boundaries.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Boundaries are really important for stress management.
Yeah.
And being mindful of where boundaries need to be created. And that's different for everybody because we all lead such different lives.
Yeah, well, everybody will experience the same things sooner or later in their life, young or old,
Yeah,
to have
that's true.
to deal with.
There are very universal life experiences that we all go through. Definitely. Limitations are part of being human.
And it's okay to say no.
Definitely okay to say no. Essential to say no. Just as much as we're leaning into things, as we're
Yeah.
participating and being active and saying yes,
Yep.
we need to balance it with.
I was told when you say yes to something, you say no to something else. So you have to figure out which is most important.
That's true. A concept of opportunity cost. Anytime you're saying yes to one thing, you're giving up something else. You're saying no to something else.
Yeah. Well, that's the second one.
Mindfulness with regards to what your limits are. Reflecting, becoming aware of what your limits are as a person, and being okay with that, honoring that, and maybe pushing yourself a little bit if you feel like that's helpful for your growth. But also, if it's not the right time, just knowing where your limits are and not trying to push too far beyond those.
Or finding out you have new limits and accepting that.
Yeah, discovering new limits.
And then that last one is like,
Yeah, we have to make time for things that we enjoy doing,
yes, we do.
to refill our cup
Yep.
so that we can pour into other people's cups. Because unfortunately, I think in a world of ideals, we would like to just be able to give and give and give as compassionate people, but it's not realistic. We have to give to ourselves as well and find that balance. Balancing control with letting go. And this kind of goes back to something that we mentioned early on with changing what we can change and then surrendering to the things that we just absolutely cannot change. Or maybe it's just not the right time for that change. Maybe we just need to surrender temporarily and then come back to it when we're in a different headspace or a different season of our lives.
Season, that's one of my favorite words.
The seasons of
Yeah.
life.
We're in, my girlfriends and I got together for a slumber party, if you want to call it that. All of our kids are raised, we're home, almost all retired. And to take that moment for ourselves and review how we grew up to where we're at today. Taking that time is just huge.
Time to reflect on all the seasons that we've gone through.
All the seasons we've gone through.
We are both small and mighty. Again, that concept of duality. We are limited, but very capable.
Sweet spot.
Yeah, finding a sweet spot.
Yeah.
We talked about balancing giving with receiving and giving and taking, but balancing work with rest is kind of a similar concept. We are capable of doing hard things. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. You can do hard things. But we shouldn't have to all the time. And I didn't want to lean too heavily into spirituality with this conversation, but it can be worth taking a look at. It can be worth investing in, because for a lot of people, it's very effective for managing worry, understanding thoughts,
And helping you learn to be nice to yourself.
finding ways to be good to yourself. Yeah.
Well, I have to live with myself every single day. Like Billy Joel sang that song. You wake up with yourself.
Wherever you go, there you are.
Yep.
Yes, that's true. We have to do the self-work and be gentle with ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, we might have lost the little clicker again. It will probably come back as it did last time. And I don't think we have, I'm gonna look to see. I don't see the slide number on that. I don't think there's too many left. You seem to have the magic touch.
You know, when while we're waiting for this, you mentioned stress being contagious and how we can pick up other people's stress. And I think sometimes we can even seek out other stressors. You know, for instance, I know some people who were so consumed just watching the news. And they would watch the news. Of course, nowadays you can watch it every single minute of the day, depending on what channel you are, and they would just be incredibly concerned about, to your point, about things that they can't control.
Yeah.
And the only way they can get through some of their anxiety was actually to withdraw from adding those unnecessary stresses. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not savvy in the world, and there's some things you need to know, but they could get away from it by just turning off those external stressors that they didn't need.
Limiting news exposure and limiting screen time.
Oh, yeah.
Screen time overall is just not great for.
Okay, when he's on his phone on Facebook as soon as he gets up in the morning. And so it's like, okay, what do we do? I'm not putting my phone down, except when we go to workout.
Yeah, it might be worth seeing if you can
Finding out what's more important between that and
find a better time for it or reduce it
Yeah,
if you want.
that's true. But workout's more important.
Working out. Do you do that after you check
We
your
do it
phone?
3 days a week, an hour a day, so we're usually downstairs on the first floor about 9:45, 10 o'clock. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
I think it's probably the batteries.
But I switched the slides to.
Oh, nice. What's the button to do that?
I've been doing it on the background because the other laptop died.
Okay, did it say the slide number back there? But
Yeah, it was 22 or 3.
Okay, so we've only got a couple more. Okay. So the content here on this computer is actually what we'll talk about because we can't get the content on the big screen over there to sync with it. So maybe we can just turn it off, right? Just so it's not distracting.
Sure.
And I'll just talk about a couple more points. Choosing to let go of things that do not serve long-term wellness. So identifying that's kind of perfect timing with reducing or setting limits on news exposure and reducing screen time. Beware of social media and any kind of extreme perspectives or
Oh, yeah.
misinformation that it can perpetuate. There's real information on social media, but there's also stuff that is made up. And so why get worried about things that aren't even real, you know? So I guess if you are going to be in front of a screen, go to legit news sources rather than get your news from social media. Might be good advice. But as Dr. Caserta said, limiting news exposure in general is a great practice because you're just picking up on all that anxiety from things that are kind of outside or potentially outside your world, you know. They're not things that you need to be concerned about in that moment. Sometimes I think we have to be willing to say goodbye or create some space between certain people that aren't the healthiest for us. And that's okay, even if it just has to be a temporary goodbye. Oh, and be careful of what you consider entertainment.
No, my gosh, that's another topic.
Just like watching the news, if we're watching really violent movies, on some level, is that kind of activating that fight or flight response that we have, or making us concerned about things that potentially we don't need to be concerned about? Okay. Lily, where did you click on this again? Okay, I think there's only 2 more slides, you guys, so I know we're a little past the hour. Reaching out for professional help is a great and okay. It's a normal option if you need it. Should be no shame in asking for professional help. A counselor, trying to set up appointments with a counselor is a great first step. Working with a physical therapist, like you talked about back there. Getting hooked up with different specialized departments like social services, population health, nutrition, all those kinds of things. And even pursuing medication management if it's something that you feel like you need. And a lot of times I do think adding medications should be a last resort. I mean, not necessarily a last resort, but you should try to be taking other steps before, doing something a little more drastic like medication. So focusing on all the things we've talked about tonight that don't involve changing your physiology or the way your body works are good things to explore first. And the point with this, with reaching out for professional help, is, again, going back to that realization or the reality of togetherness. We're not alone. There are people we can ask for help, even when it doesn't feel that way or we feel overwhelmed or lonely. There's help out there somewhere. And the next slide. We mentioned this earlier. When you fall out of routine or you encounter acute stress, that's a good opportunity to practice all the coping mechanisms that we've talked about. And if you fall out of the routine that you've created for yourself, just finding a way or setting some intention to get back to that routine as soon as you can, if it's important for you and it still works for you. And the next slide might be, stress is here to stay, but we can manage it in healthy ways. Dialing down our stress level means having a plan and trying to stick to it. So we're not trying to eliminate stress, we're just trying to turn down the volume dial to a place where it's more manageable. Next slide, please. This is another summary slide. I don't need to go over it. And then we were going to end with one more picture of nature,
Wow.
just to embrace the gratitude of where we live and the opportunity to de-stress that's all around us. And then we were potentially going to do a little bit of sharing at this point, but I think since we're well past the hour, we'll just...
I think we were
Oh,
sharing
okay.
the whole way through.
Yeah, we were sharing stories the whole way through, so that was great. But are there any quick questions or no?
I'm thankful that you presented it this way. This is something that I needed to hear.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, even if there was just one helpful thing for you guys to find a belief that things are going to be okay.
It will be better.
Yeah, they'll get better.
Joel, in your experience, when stress gets significant enough that they have anxiety and worries and things to that extent, it tends to be more of a gradual process. Am I correct in terms of resolution?
Yes. Don't expect any extreme resolution right away. Is
Yeah.
that kind of...
Yeah, I just was curious of what you generally see when people get significant stress, where it gets to the point of being anxiety.
Yeah, I think both the buildup of stress and anxiety to extreme levels and also the resolution of that are gradual processes. If it's extreme, especially if the buildup is extreme, there may be something else physically going on there. But in general, it's kind of a steady slope upward and then back downward as we do things to compensate for the stressors in our lives. And, of course, working with your primary care team is always a good place to start if you feel like anxiety is something in your life that you need help addressing. They can probably steer you in a good direction for finding help. Thank you for the question. That is a helpful thing to remember.
Not everything is a head-on collision stressor,
Right.
but I've experienced the chemical part with massive amounts of steroids, and I swore I'd never touch them again, and then I was in a position I had no choice. I'm not on unfamiliar territory,
Yeah.
and fortunately my experience is helping, but the reality of coming back to reality is more challenging, it's slower, it's harder, I'm older. Things just don't bounce back like they used to.
But you're doing it.
Yes.
You're taking the steps that you can.
Determination, yeah.
That's the important thing.
I think that was one of the most, finding out of the horrible, the good. I'm not like other patients, and I had amazing conversations with nurses and doctors. I was able to help them, which is a beautiful return for what they do to help me, and
Yeah.
a lot of change, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically.
Changing together,
Yeah.
being in it and experiencing it together. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
I hope you have a peaceful evening. And thanks for tuning in if you watch live.